cold and empty as the miles I roam.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Brothers and Brew. Today we're going to be talking about several political climate issues and a few other maybe cryptocurrency subject matter. We're not going to be doing beer review today because it is 2:30 in the morning where my brother is at, and I had to do this particular episode now before it was too late in my day. It's Polish Independence Day and whatnot. So I am Jonathan. I'm sitting here in the lovely Poland. It's actually not quite so lovely. It's raining. It's probably going to snow soon. And it's midday. Edward is across the world on the other side, almost exactly on the other side, I think. And he's sitting in beautiful California. How you doing, Edward?
I'm doing great. It is very early in the morning, 02:30 for those of you on proper time, and it is 50 degrees Fahrenheit, so somewhere right around, I would say 10 to 13 Celsius in there. All right, so you want to start it off? What's the
topic? So I mean, we've got a lot of topics we could hit up today.
And just because we're not reviewing doesn't mean we're not drinking. Just by the way,
I'm drinking coffee. That's what I'm drinking. It's like literally 11 in the morning right now.
I'm drinking.
Although for the Polish, half of them probably have vodka still in their glass.
Go to bed juice. So.
We had a busy couple of weeks here in the EU. Belarus, Lukashenko, and in Russia, Drozhin over there in Turkey, causing some issues. The big one right now for Poland is the border dispute. That's even being discussed in the United States. So what's basically been going on is Lukashenko's people went down to Syria, Afghanistan, got a bunch of rich, refugees there and said, hey, you give us all your money, we'll fly you to Belarus. And from there, you can take a wonderful trip to Germany. Germany will take you in. They will take in anybody, and you'll be in Europe. And then the refugees got to Belarus, and then they were put in trucks to go to Germany, and they got to the Belarusian border. They were marched out of the trucks with machine guns to their back and told, walk toward Poland. And they walked them through the forest several miles, got them to the border, and then the Polish military was like, no. And they got their machine guns out and said, go back to Belarus. You're not welcome here. And in order to get to Germany, you got to go through Poland. But there's no guarantee that they're just going to walk into Poland and go, okay, well, we still only got 1,000 miles of walking to go to get to Germany. So there's this stalemate on the border that started to accrue where the Belarusians said, if you don't walk toward the border, we'll shoot you. And the Polish were saying, if you don't walk away from the border, we'll shoot you. And there's barbed wire sitting all along the border, and these poor refugees are basically sitting in the freezing winter cold for the last week, freezing themselves. And so Germany tried to get involved because there's been a lot of turmoil. Obviously, Russia's influence after the election and Lukashenko refusing to leave has gotten worse. And almost 2 weeks ago now, we found out that Russia is going to be converting the Belarus to its currency. So Belarus will effectively be Russia at that point. They'll be on the same economic terms. So the hard part on this is that there were several things that happened at the same time here. So, and there's some conspiracy theories behind this, so we'll discuss these. So the refugees get pushed to the border. Now, as this is taking place, we have a couple of things that Russia's doing in the background. On between last Monday and Sunday, and still going on earlier in this week, Russia had told the military, the Russian militia, the Russian insurgents in Crimea, who they've had a peace with since I think August, all of a sudden did 14 strikes on Ukraine within the span of about 6 days. They blew up the gas pipeline running power into Ukraine, and they destroyed the laboratories and the refinery for their water. And so there's a bunch of cities now without proper water refinement, and power is out for large portions. Apparently, the word is Turkey actually gave drones to Ukraine, and those Turkish drones bombed the militia members after they started killing Ukrainian troops, and they pushed them back to their home base. But the worry here, I guess, would be that the news fiasco, everybody's sights on the border, is really trying to keep the Russian KGB movements and the supply movements of putting more resources to the militias on the Ukrainian border, so that they can probably pull an actual invasion attempt or another full scale attack in January, when things have gotten weaker for the Ukraine without proper heating, electrical, water, and they're breaking down infrastructure is what they're doing. They're hitting key points. Then at the same time, we might actually end up with a war accruing here on some level. It's very possible, because the border dispute with Poland and Belarus, it's very heated. The two countries hate each other right now. They really, really dislike each other. And Germany and the EU Council have told Lukashenko, you got to knock it off. You have to, these refugees, you took them in, you have to deal with them. Meanwhile, while all this is going on, Putin has been restricting natural gas supply, and so that has caused electrical prices and heating prices to soar throughout Europe. And the same type of pipeline, the same type of energy that runs into Poland and into Germany comes through Belarus, along with the roadways for supply chains from Eastern Europe and China through Poland into Germany, into Central Europe. All goes through Belarus. There's almost no other reliable method of transportation. So what Europe said is, and this was almost a direct quote from what was yesterday in the news, was it will do no good to restrict and put tariffs and embargo pretty much Belarus any longer. They're not going to stop. They're going to be changing to the Russian currency. They're fully supported by Russia and its allies, which means they're also supported by China, most likely in a lot of ways. And since Ukraine is tied up and the exits to Ukraine are all pretty much covered by Russian sympathizing militia forces, you can't get any supplies through. And so they said it's time to, they've used these words, we need to overthrow Lukashenko. And those are fighting words. If those of you don't know, if you are an EU council, if you are the United States, and you say we are going to overthrow you,
the United States, the United States, and maybe the French and English, I would say yes.
Well, they're part of the EU, and they're all in agreement.
Not the British anymore.
Well, there was no dissension in the EU Council about the words used to get rid of Lukashenko.
Yeah,
so
it probably won't be.
So I don't think we're headed for it necessarily immediately, but we're literally one vote away from it at this point. Lukashenko retorted immediately pretty much with, well, I control all your power. So if you even try to move troops toward me, I'm going to cut. Yeah, he's right. And he said
he's not going to cut it, because Putin will kill him if he cuts it.
Well, he said I can. Well, what literally his quote was, I wonder what would happen if all of a sudden the gas stopped working.
Oh yeah,
and then he said,
and then Norway would be happy as fuck, because they've got all the extra gas they give to Germany, and they got pipelines that connect it.
And then he said, and then he paused. There was this pause, and then he said, word for word, also, we have all of the land routes from Eastern Europe going into Central Europe. So what happens if we decide to close all of the land routes for shipping? And so Europe, if it makes a move, will temporarily at least cause a trade embargo on itself for energy and for trade goods. Again, so it's a very difficult problem.
It's a very bold and correct assertion. I'm going to present a hypothetical as I've had these discussions with people stateside. And first thing I'll say is
Well,
that states. First thing I want to say is stateside. We hear none of this. The United States is infatuated with the 18-year-old child, Rittenhouse, who shot some protesters and looters in Kenosha, and then he went there to shoot them. By the way, that's why he went armed, because he was chomping at the bit playing toy soldier at 17. Got his wish, and now we have ourselves a fucking circus on TV. But
I have,
so
and that's a separate subject. But I have mixed feelings on that one in two directions.
Getting back to Eastern Europe and the European theater as a whole. So the first thing I want to say is the Belarusians absolutely control a large amount of the energy flow from, I'm not even going to call it Russia, I'm going to just say from Putin to the EU. Belarus is a puppet. Their leader is a puppet.
Oh yeah, but
they
for sure,
need to be. They need to have been. That state as a whole has needed to been dissolved and divvied back up into Russia proper and Lithuania, and potentially even the Ukraine for 30 years. I would say, but it's not going to be. Unfortunately, Putin. I will present a hypothetical here. Putin and the oligarchic mafia that he has, because understand that he gets a cut of everything from the traffic citations all the way up to the Fortune 500 businesses. So Putin and his oligarchic mafia that is in place does not benefit from cutting that pipeline. He benefits.
of course not.
He benefits with the actions in Donbass and in Crimea, but he does not benefit, neither does his oligarchs, in a protracted engagement with Europe, the United States, or anywhere in Asia. Now, he can get involved in some proxy fights in Syria because, let's be honest, anything that's going to be going through Syria other than military force projection is going to have to go through the Dardanelles and up through Turkey, and will be subject to the whims of the Turkish Navy and the treaties that were established in the early 1900s.
Well, and if you try to run goods through anything south of that, like in Afghanistan, the Taliban's taxing everything.
Well, you're just not gonna. So and they did curry some favor with Azerbaijan and the Caucasus states by allowing Armenia to be basically partitioned in half in the last year when Armenia got sacked. Mm-hmm. So the Arab Caucasus states are happy with the Russians because they broke their word for Armenia. Now, that being said, getting back to what I was saying, is that's an interesting threat. It doesn't hold any teeth because it's not Putin saying it. The interesting thing is going to be Russian troop buildup on Donbass and over near Crimea. And then they'll do what they always do, which is they'll withdraw after 2 months, and suddenly there'll be like 20,000 new partisan fighters in the region that show up to harry and harass and legitimize a claim and issue new passports. And they're going most of them are underpaid militia, honestly, or underpaid mercenaries. Correct. They're veterans or mercenaries or people or criminals who knows with what's going on, and they're going to go fight the Ukrainians. Europe is doing little to nothing to support Ukraine. The United States is doing little to nothing to support Ukraine. I've been saying for 4 years now. The Obama administration dropped the ball. The Trump administration dropped the ball. But getting to the point here, until I see Germany bolster its actual army, like double its size to a proper army, it's nowhere near the Italian, let alone the French, army. Until it actually conscripts some people.
Well, you don't have to have the Polish army is a decent size for a Central European army. So it's not huge, but it's a decent size. So they don't need much.
But so let's.
And they have NATO to fall back on.
For the past 10 years, the Russians have been cutting their teeth in Libya. Past 30 years.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Afghanistan,
I know.
Iraq,
I know this.
Libya, Syria,
I-
and the Ukraine. They've got veterans and they understand the terrain and the tactics. When was the
mhm.
last time Poland in mass sent its military out to do
Well,
stuff?
so
Not a
people,
few people into Afghanistan. I'm talking in mass, like
no, no,
40,000 people
I
a
know.
year.
I know what you're getting at. I know what you're getting at, but you have to remember there's a few things that Poland has going for it. One, it knows the exact same territory. Like I have several friends now in the Polish military, and they know everything from the edges of their border, their territory, all the way through the Ukraine. Like it's the back of their hand anyway. It's their territory. They used to work together. Now the other part too that people always misjudge, which is why when Poland a couple of weeks ago, I forget, we know we haven't had one of these talks in a while. When Murkowski said, if you don't give us the 46 billion you owe us, we'll cause the third world war. When that happened, and I was laughing because the United States has U.S. Marines, U.S. Army, and an Air Force base right there in Germany. So if they need reinforcements, they'll just drop them. People forget how big America is. You know, in America, we think about moving a military. We think about going across the ocean. I have Polish people who complain because they're like, man, I have to drive from Warsaw from Warsaw to Wrocław. It's like 4.5 hours. I'm like, so it's like Fresno to Los Angeles. It's like not a long way for us.
Yeah, but the infrastructure is different. That's one thing. But the big point still remains on this is that I no offense to any of the Poles who I'm sure are patriotic and want to fight, but their sergeant corps that is doing the training is not blooded in the sense that the Russian corps is. So like the Russians have been in the sergeants who are training, they've been in it. And so they've got soldiers coming out with an inkling of veteranism just off of that proxy to the training regiment. Now, I'm sure there's some sergeants in the Polish army that have, but the bulk of the people doing the training are teaching out of textbooks, and it's an entirely different story.
From what I've seen from the videos my friends have sent or whatnot, their special forces have got some blood on their hands from Afghanistan. They were really active, and their comms units, but and they're mechanized. Their mechanized units are the ones that are rolling the highways.
This is the question I would ask you. If you could take equal numbers, would you take a Polish division who has been in Poland for the majority of it, may have 1/10 of it that's actually seen combat, or an Australian division that's been running side by side for 20 years now? And so all I'm saying is that at this current time, even though it's much smaller, the Australian military in veterancy and actual combat performance probably
not just that, man, but gear wise, the Australians have a much better quality of gear.
If you were to take a Russian regiment and an Australian regiment and just put them pound for pound, the Australians probably take them out just because of the involvement they've had in global affairs versus the Russians and the theaters that they've been in. And equipment, of course, like better logistics and better equipment. And there is that trump card of the U.S. being in Germany. But when it comes to actual worry for war, until Germany steps up its actual numbers and soldiers it has,
and see that's where you and I are going to that's where you and I are going to differ, because I don't think, as a collective and with NATO involved as well, and Britain and America, they don't need to bolster themselves. They can send one regiment, and we can send a regiment, and somebody else can send a regiment. We'd have more troops to do it.
Who's there? Understanding how the European Union.
Yeah, who's going to lead the army? Is that what you're going to ask?
It? Who's leading it?
So by their definition of it, it would end up being most likely Germany that would lead it, and unless the U.S. was involved, then a U.S. general would take over.
So
that's probably what happened.
They all speak different languages. They all have.
But they all speak English, man. Everybody.
I understand that, but
all the commanders are going to speak
English. The French planes are in French. The German planes are in German. The Swedish planes are in Swedish.
We did it in Afghanistan and Iraq, man. It's not that hard.
They're flying Eurofighters. We're flying F-35s. So I mean, you've got there's, and I'm not saying it's not possible, but as of right now, and if it's a NATO action.
You want to know how I know? You want to know how I know this is a little serious? Is a week ago on Saturday, my son called me, and we all, he does his stuff with his
You
stuff.
don't say anything
I'm
sensitive.
not, no, I'm not. He I was like, you okay? And he's like, man, I'm stressed out right now. And I was like, okay. And he goes, I can't talk about it. I was like, all right. And that was it. And I've texted him about 20 times. It always at least turns blue because he saw it. It has the little notice on the WhatsApp has not turned blue, so I'm sure there's stuff, somewhere. So I'm like, I know that things are being watched very carefully at the border right now.
Well, things are being watched. So here's so getting away from the European side, I've expressed my European things. So now you got to ask yourself the question: Russia knows it loses any engagement, no matter how long and protracted it is, with Europe. Not just physically, like its physical forces will lose, it loses economically. So unless Putin is cynically unhinged and he's gone absent-minded in his head and is crazy, which some people argue that he's got Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, but unless Putin is crazy or he's lost control of his government, no one benefits in Russia from a war with anyone. And you got to figure that it's a monopoly criminal organization that runs that country, and it's the oligarchs out there that are running it. So their whole job is to make money. That's all they care about is money and power to stay on top. So how does a war with Europe,
Russia's
all
been
the
using
money is made?
Russia's been using the restriction of natural gas to create revenue for itself. It's been hiking up the prices extremely to create money doing that during the course of last month.
As it should. I mean, as it should. Any good merchant would do that when you've got.
What baffles me here is who in the European Council decided we're going to go green in Europe and also rely on Belarus and Russia for transport of goods and energy. Who decided that one?
There's been a push for years by a minority to move to move away from Russia. But the problem is that politically, Western Europe, mainly Germany, the Netherlands, France, Italy, they've known that they can leverage Russia by basically saying, yeah, it's going to cost us a little more and it's going to put us in a situation if you decided to do what they're doing right now, which everybody thought probably wouldn't happen, but you are 100% reliant on us. So if you're not going to punish us too hard. So we're going to have the goodwill of saying, hey, fuck with us and we're going to switch to Norway or go green or go nuclear on all of our energy needs. And at the same
that's
time,
a 7-year plan.
Well, I mean, France already did it. France and Belgium, they don't need Russia. They're completely green and they use atomic energy.
Like I said earlier before we were on, Switzerland and Austria, are seeing 8-hour blackouts right now.
It's the German states, and it's because they use oil for their furnaces and they use natural gas for their energy and in their heating. So they're in a bit of a problem, and that's a temporary problem because they're starting to move away. And Putin's trying to milk this for everything that it is worth because they are starting to move away. They're going to solar, they're going to wind, they're going to hydroelectric. So, I mean, shit, you want to know a country that could probably put Russia out of business? Is if Ukraine were to build a hydroelectric dam on its rivers, it would probably be able to feed all of, like, at least the Balkan states' energy needs on just that one fucking river. It's the three gorges right there north. You could put it right at the border of Belarus and Ukraine. That solves your floating on the river issue too, and you control any flood stage. I mean, you could shut it off and back up Belarus into a fucking swamp if you wanted to. But the fact of the matter is that you could build a hydroelectric system, even if it was just towers in that river down the middle of it or the sides of it, that could power your entire country and probably Moldavia and Romania and Hungary and all the way down to
the worry that's been going on the other side, the possibility of a conflict, as remote as it is. The other side is the possibility of Russian expansion or severe Russian influence within areas like Lithuania. Now, troop movements into Lithuania from that side is extremely difficult because it's all swamps. No army has ever really crossed into Lithuania from that direction because you can't get through there with any kind of armor. You can't get through there with troops without taking loss for sickness and weather conditions. So that's enough. That's not likely, but there is the problem of influence from that direction coming in from the small towns and whatever's out there.
Influence is a different story. So Putin's, you remember Putin's KGB, like he's old school
Yeah,
KGB. He's
he's
known
psyop.
since, well, he's known since he was in that the old USSR, modern day Russian Federation, stands no chance whatsoever of beating America alone, let alone a united North American, Australian, Pacific, Asian, whatever that area is called down there, Oceania, and European front. It's got. I mean, you're also considered, so he knows this, and so he's more likely to do what he continues to do now, which is force in Russian immigrants into countries, and then force a vote to justify a means because he knows
The annexation of Mexico plan in sort of a way that we were talking about.
He knows for a fact that Europe's too interested in being merchants. They're making too much money and living too comfortable compared to where the people who remember, I mean, you got people in power who are still Cold War young. Mom and dad's.
Poland didn't leave Russia until 2005. Some of the people that I work with here remember it.
And it cost them a plane full of their leaders when they did it because it magically crashed and killed everybody.
That's just not something you laugh at, but you do laugh at it.
So when you look back at these situations, you look at the leadership in Germany who grew up in Cold War Europe. You look at the leadership in France and your leadership in Italy, and they go like, because we grew up at the end of the Cold War, but you still remember the pink country maps. You pulled it down and it said CCCCP.
We actually have one still at the house there with mom and dad. I've seen
that map. It's gone. But anyways, it might be in a storage unit somewhere. But either way, it's you grew up in that time period, and when you were in Europe, you remember, especially if you were in Germany and you were on the other side of the wall, you remember how shitty things were, and you remember the lira in Italy being a friggin' 100,000 to 1. And you remember the mark when it emerged being 7 to 1, and the franc, even when it was strong, was 7 to 1 before they went to the euro. And you remember these times of strife, and so you're not wanting to go back to that. It's too comfortable right now. Things are too good, even with what appears to be rough and tumble right now. It was nothing compared to 1991 when Serbia and Croatia and Bosnia were on fire.
Exactly, I can remember seeing the headlines where it was like $200 for milk and crap.
Yeah. So you remember these things, and you don't want to go back to it. So there's they want to keep everything status quo, and that's doable. And the Russians at the same time, they didn't get back into it until 2000, basically 2003. They were out of it.
Probably later than that, honestly.
They were reemerging after the U.S. and all of its economists over there, and there were bailout plans. And they used the dollar for a while as a currency to get things back up. And we put a real vested interest in creating a stable partner that would turn around and be a dick to everybody because Eastern Europe and things haven't changed. And Putin knows that he can't win that, so he needs to do things very much psyops, which is. I think
that yes, the psyops thing, but I also think Putin is playing the silver fox here. He's been taught what he's doing is he's laying there and he's waiting, all curled up, nestled in the Siberian den, because I think he wants to see what China does with Taiwan to see if we get wrapped up in a Pacific conflict. Because if the United States gets wrapped up in the Pacific, we cannot help Europe. And that makes it more toe-to-toe for him, which he likes.
Yes and no. What it does is it leaves our bases in Europe, but we don't have any kind of actual projection.
Well, we will move our resources because I was actually talking to a friend of mine the other day about this. If we end up in a conflict, I think this is what happens if China invades Taiwan. I literally think we go like this. The reason that I don't think so, I don't think we react to Taiwan in a real way, is because if we get tied up and Russia takes the breadbasket of the Ukraine, then we have a problem in Europe, and we are closer with Europe than we are with Taiwan, which we won't even officially recognize as sovereign.
So here is why I would disagree to a degree with that. I'm not saying that that's not a plausible outcome,
I
but
don't think we do it.
what I'm going to say is that Japan is actively bolstering its military. It's doing what Germany is not. So Japan is actually breaking treaties, and we're looking the other way, and rebuilding its military, specifically for the Chinese. Not to mention the Vietnamese,
This is
the Filipinos
so.
are
This is
all in this mix.
so. I will be in the Philippines the beginning of next year for a couple of months doing some stuff to make some good money. Now, I've talked about what they're doing, and they're bolstering their military. I don't think we react to Taiwan. I think because you got to remember something too. If it happens within the next 2 years, the Marine Corps is not ready. Its littoral combat's not ready to fight, so they don't want to fight. So the time frame that's optimal for China to actually invade, if it was going to do so, if its economy was actually stable enough to do it, would have been in the next 18 months. Now,
So
so I think if it does hit Taiwan, I think what we do is we put Marines as reactionary forces in all the islands in case, and we don't do anything because we need our resources to save Europe if it goes to shit.
so
honestly,
I personally don't think that the Chinese amphibious forces are capable of taking Taiwan. I personally
oh
just
yeah, they
don't.
are.
I don't.
Oh
I don't
yes,
know.
they are.
Okay.
Oh, for
So
sure.
once again, you can state that. You can state that,
Yeah,
and that's fine. So this is my opinion piece, and it's based on three things. One, speaking to actual Chinese nationals, their military is garbage. It's just hot. I mean, it's big, but it's garbage. It's untrained. If you're a soldier and you go in and you have any means whatsoever in your social credit score, you don't even have to stay for training. You can leave and go home after a day at boot, and then decide I don't want to go in. And like how we have the cards now, which is like you're being too
Yeah.
mean, drill sergeant.
Yeah.
Back
What
off,
is it? The
back off
stress
for a bit.
cards. Stress cards.
Yeah,
So
so
what the fuck is that?
they can be just like I have money. I don't want to show up to basic because they're a conscript. They're not a professional military.
So
They
well,
have-
they're you got to understand their conscript army, their mandated service army is different than their regulars, and they have enough regulars, and they do have decent littoral combat ships that invade Taiwan, along
hold on.
with an air force that can bomb that
Hold
place
on,
into the ground.
hold on. We're
So,
gonna
saying.
get to that. We're gonna get to that. I know that you have a differing opinion, and that's fine.
Mhm.
The Chinese military has zero veterancy, zero, like whatsoever. They wouldn't, and they have no blue water experience in combat whatsoever. Their air force they have zero aces. They have, I mean, hell, they've got one quasi operational aircraft carrier. And
Not any longer. They have 3 now that operate.
No, they're not. They're not operating. They're not.
No, it does operate. I actually looked this up on the website the other day.
Okay,
So-
I'm gonna disagree. They've got 2 that are in dock because one, when they put it out to sea, sank, and they had to bring it back and immediately
And it's
reset.
fixed. It's fixed.
And
and
the other
running.
one caught the old Russian one caught on fire. So they've got one operational. They've got a good submarine force, but let's be honest, the Taiwanese military is on par, if not better than theirs, and probably better equipped with battle tested gear that has actually seen combat because it's all US and European gear and has been seeing combat for 30 years. Meanwhile, the Chinese knockoff of American weapons hasn't really seen any combat. I mean, they just really
See, this is where you don't have a very high opinion of the Chinese military, but
I have no
I've
opinion
seen
of
them.
it. They couldn't even beat the Indians. They got their ass kicked by the Indians.
But while they're untested, their equipment is thoroughly tested before it goes on for their regulars. Now, conscripts, I don't know
it's
what they're
garbage.
giving their conscripts to wear. You say it's garbage, but if it stops a bullet, it stops it. My point here is that they're not something where you can just look at the Chinese military and then write them off. That would be the worst thing you could do as a commander, is to go, it's just the Chinese.
No.
Like
So
that would be
I'm not writing them off.
absolutely horrible
What
idea.
I'm saying is that they've got a decent. Their brownwater fleet is good, and the brownwater fleet is worthy of respect. The Taiwanese shore defense and batteries and air force is. I don't see how the Chinese actually pacify unless they're going to turn Taiwan into a wastegate and make it unusable for anybody. So
Mhm.
if they want to blanket it with enough missiles to completely turn it into just a hellscape, then yes. But then it's unusable, and then what the fuck was the point of fighting the war anyways? Because you've done that. The second thing
That was
is that the second thing is that China itself, and you can do a little bit of research on this, and you can talk to some people from China. China itself, outside of the western cities of Shanghai and Macau and Hong Kong, China itself is literally imploding inward on itself. Its infrastructure that was
no,
built.
that's what I said in the beginning. I said if it had the economic strength to uphold a conflict,
It's
but that's the problem with waiting. If I like I said in the beginning, if I was Russia waiting for China, your problem is that China over the last 6 months has had three different economic crises, and the one that's currently
it cannibalized
in flux.
itself.
Well, the one that's currently in flux right now is the energy crisis with their water and their dams and their like flooding and their problem. They can't get anything to run right.
They almost lost the Three Gorge Dam to floods. They did lose the Upper Mongolian dams to floods, which flooded their cities. Those giant megapolises they built, they're collapsing because they did things like use bottles and cans in the inside to save on space and pour concrete
Instead
over
of rock.
bamboo instead of rebar, like that kind of situations. And they're falling apart and it's killing people. Buildings are collapsing at a ridiculous number. It's almost a humanitarian crisis. They have instability in the northwest. The Sichuan province stands nothing from starving itself to death because they cut off their food if they go to war with the West. I mean, say what you want to, China is not making enough food to feed itself. Period. They're going to have massive instability. They're beating their chest. I mean, honestly, there's only one country that China can go to war to, and people will look the other way. If they were to just walk across in North Korea, everybody would be like, eh. Like that would be it. They'd be like, eh. Everybody would do it. But that's really the only country that's on the list. Other than that,
Actually, there is.
Believe
Believe it or not, there is one more which has been in talks in the news here recently. Is there's been severe advancement of China into Siberia lately. They've been taking more than their usual 11 miles a year.
Yeah, so
it's
China's
been kind of annoying.
doing to Russia and Kyrgyzstan in those states what Russia's doing to sending over people disguised as partisans and then saying, "Oh, we want to join China." It was always Chinese. But when China decides to make a move, the first thing they'll do is just reintegrate Mongolia back into the fold, and then it'll push its weight into an area that actually matters, which is the Himalayas, trying to connect to Iran so that it can secure
the dance that's kind of fun to watch if you're paying attention to the politics in the Asian European theater is the Constantinople, Istanbul fiasco in Turkey because
they're building that canal.
They have to abide the Chinese trade into Europe. They have to not piss off Russia while also appeasing the U.S. by giving the Ukrainians drones. They have to kick out, in order to appease Russia, they kicked out 10 different Western countries' diplomats, but at the same time gave the drones to fight the Russians for Ukraine. They're New York. They're New York voting on the Constitution. They abstained courteously.
Getting back to China before we move into Turkish politics and the utter shit show that is that new canal that they want to build to bypass that Dardanelles Treaty. Getting past that and getting back to China before we change the subject. We need to address one more thing, which is the strategic logistics of their civilian population. They don't have the means to feed themselves, and they've put themselves in massive compromising areas by one, their entire industrial sector is on the coastline, and two, they have these giant dams that are just aching for a Moab to strike on them. And the war's over immediately. All you gotta do is blow up the Three Gorge Dam, and that's the end of the war. It's done.
The other thing is they moved a lot of grain resource to Africa when they purchased up all that in Africa, but the supply line's too deep. They tried to take the southern route of the Silk Road was developed primarily so they could move things through the Middle East up into from
So
Africa.
awesome.
And
How do they get? So if China goes to war with the United States, I 100% guarantee you that Egypt and Israel and Jordan
Mhm.
and
will help us
probably
take the supply line.
and Saudi Arabia all, if not join, remain friendly and cordial and respect embargoes. How does Egypt get this grain from the Sudan, which is where it has it all at,
Mhm.
up to China proper? They don't. China just can't feed it. So China's in a situation where, just like Russia, there is any war for any amount of time with the Western powers destroys their
Which is
country.
why they want Ukraine. Russia needs that breadbasket. It's always been that way. The Ukrainian
Well,
area has always been a breadbasket for Russia
well, I
since the
mean,
beginning of
yes, but
the empires
it's
of
so
Rus.
what Russia wants is that buffer zone. They want that march
Mhm.
in between them more than anything, and they want a friendly power. They actually don't want Ukraine for themselves. They want a state there that they don't have to manage and can just let it be a shitty infrastructureless hellhole that no one wants to go through. That's what they want.
Well, they think the thing I keep trying to stress to people is that I think that personally, and this is my prediction. I think that Putin's older. I think he is getting sick. I would expect him to die in the next 6 years. And I think what he will be is, and I will say this about Putin, despite what anybody's opinion is of him directly, I regard him as the most cunning and best world leader post World War II till now. I believe he is overall the leader. He did not want the job when he came in, and he's kept Russia on a steady.
Didn't want the job. No one who goes for the job.
I've read both. I watched the documentary on him, and I've read both of the biographies on him. And when he was initially offered the job, he didn't want it. He openly will tell people he didn't want it because he was afraid that they were giving him the job because the higher ups had stepped down because they didn't want it. And his first question, he always in everything was, how come nobody wants to take it? He was just working as an agent. And he was told, you will take the job, which is, as well as I, it was, you're going to take it or your family's gone anyway. So he took it. And one of the first things he did, if you're paying attention to their history, is he wiped out everybody who stepped down. And he got rid of them as competition. And once he did that, he's committed. And so whether or not you want to smile and laugh through the tactics, they work. And
I'm not smiling and laughing at the tactics. I'm smiling and laughing at something completely else that is different, and you'll laugh too when I tell you.
But what it is here is he's the only leader in the world that has been consistently a threat to everybody, but never actually committed a threatening thing directly. His leadership is incredibly smart. He's an incredibly brilliant leader. Now, for what the resources he does not have, I seriously regard him as an honest to God, probably the best leader that we've had post World War II as countries go.
He is a ruthless
as a tactician.
He's a cunning and overall. He's a cunning and all of his political opponents get killed. He rigs elections and he sets up things so that he can do things like, I'm gonna step down for a year and put my crony in, and then come back and be president. But you gotta understand that he came to power when Russia was failing to defeat the Chechens. He came to power and quelled that revolution, and that's what got him where he is. Saying he didn't want the position is like saying George Washington didn't want the position when he was showing up every day dressed in a military garb at the fucking State House, and he's like, I didn't really want this position, but there's
a difference here.
I'll take it.
Yeah, but you see, again, you have a very, like, the Western idea of what Russia is. Like, for him to take that position is literally a death sentence. That's why in the last 3 years
he was elected to it. He didn't.
There's no elections. That was worth a shit. You know better than that. Like this, like literally. That's why 3 years ago he had the parliament there in Russia or whatever it is that they use. He had them vote in the clause that says that if you've ever been president of Russia, you cannot be put in jail or executed or given death penalty for a crime while you were president. So there's a reason why he knows this is going down.
So I would say that on a short term basis that you are probably right that Putin is um, one of the most successful world
He's the most
leaders.
cunning. It's his cunning is that I'm
So
impressed by.
yeah, he's not the most cunning because he has no successor, and so when he dies, Russia falls apart.
Well, yeah, no, yes, but which is what I was getting at in the beginning here is I think that, and you know what's funny about this is either through revolt and Bolshevik revolution or not here, and a great a Russian version of a Great Leap Forward going on, um, like like the Russians never really keep their power when they have a change of leader. So I think here what Putin will do is will almost recreate the original map of the USSR before he dies, and then he'll be the guy who has statues of himself everywhere, and might be the first Russian king that does not have his statue torn down by everybody immediately. So
So I would say there's no way in shit he rebuilds a map of the USR without a full scale war with.
I think he will get most of it. I think in the next 6 years, with the change of political climate, he'll get several more.
He would need the entirety of the Baltic states.
Not the whole thing, Ed. Not the whole thing. I'm saying most of it.
Yeah, but we're just gonna do half. So we just said most of it.
Okay.
So he would need the entirety of the Baltic states, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, parts of Afghanistan. He would need Georgia. He would need Armenia.
Georgia's already there.
He would need parts of Azerbaijan. He would need Poland, Ukraine, Lithuania, and Hungary. We're leaving Romania out of it because Romania is huge. All right, so we're leaving Romania and Moldavia out of it. There's just no way. There's just no way. He might.
I think he's going to push. I think he pushes in and takes the good chunks of Ukraine. And I honestly think in the next 6 years, if he lives that long, that the political climate or the wars we end up in are going to allow him to influence a lot of the countries you just mentioned and grab at least
the
two or three of them.
The Baltic states are never going without military conflict. There's just no way in shit.
Well, you would have said the same thing about Belarus a few years ago.
No, I wouldn't.
Like five years ago, I didn't think Belarus was going to fall to Russia. I didn't think that. I thought they might be friendly, but not fall.
No, my entire life since I developed my actual cognitive thought of how game theory works, Belarus has been part of Russia since.
And Latvia is the next one is being pushed really hard for influence.
Yeah, but Latvia is not going to go. There's no way. There's no way that Estonia, Latvia, or Lithuania.
Estonia will require a fight. Latvia is a different story.
None of those three are going to willingly subject themselves to Russia again. You forget that they identify more with. I mean, even after the purges post World War II, they identify still more with German roots than they do with Russian roots. So
depends where you go, man.
I'm not gonna say. So if I had to put it on a scale, I'm gonna say that it's the leaning towards like using cunning to get Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania to join Russia like they are doing with.
You cannot get Estonia. The Estonians are super proud. They'll fight. That's what they're.
He's got less than a 30% chance of pulling that off. Ukraine's a different story because Ukraine identified more with Russia than any of those states. Those states hated him. All right. And they still hate him. Now, getting to Ukraine, I think Donbass is lost. Crimea is gone forever. You're looking at a new Ukraine. By the end of 2026, there'll be a new border on Ukraine. And pending some kind of conflict where the Western powers get involved, but I just don't see that happening. And until I see Germany actually invest in its military, like soundly, at least get on par with the French.
I don't see Germany doing that. I don't see Germany doing that because
there'll be no conflict.
Well, yes, there can be because they'll just call their allies. That's what Germany does. Germany just lets everybody else fight with them. That's what they do.
The French can't. They're overextended in Africa. The Italians won't. They're too latched to Russia. There's only one person. And you got to remember, when Great Britain left, Germany is now the emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. That's all the EU is the HRE done over. And the veto vote was Great Britain, and they left Germany and the Netherlands in charge of Europe. So if Germany doesn't step up to the plate and actually fund its military, there's no way in hell that the rest of Europe's going to war. Until I see an
Like I
actual
said,
military.
Germany is reactionary, so it entirely depends on what happens between the U.S. and China. That's what happens here.
Historically, Germany has been the least reactionary country that's ever
Yeah,
existed.
but they are reactionary now completely. They're literally the most passive country in Europe. Quite
Well,
literally, I
because
think. I don't know if
once
there's
again,
anybody else more passive.
their leaders remember being annexed and divided and living under oppression, and they don't want to go back to war. Jan's parents are still alive. I mean, they
I
remember
was
these
thinking
things.
about that the other day.
Yeah, they remember these things. So it's not, he was in it. He was a colonel in the East German military. So I mean, he was in it. They don't want to go back to this. I mean, they've got their own problems. And to be completely honest, the U.S. isn't going to get involved because we have a borderline collapsing democracy here in this country, and we have our own issue of like the sins of the Reconstruction rearing its ugly head, and racism is back at full swing like we've never seen before since 1991, and
It's reverse racism this time, man.
well, it's across the board all over the place. You've got
Like I sent a thing to mom the other day. Did you see what the investment firms and that's a whole other topic. If you want to change topics, we can go to that one.
I don't want to get into race politics and businesses doing what they're doing.
It was the hiring. There was an article on the hiring policies for the Fortune 500 in the U.S. It was really bad.
I don't want to get into that. But what I will get into is that on both sides, racial tensions on both sides of the board are an all-time high. Everything's been polarized. Media and social media are to blame on all of this, as well as social media giving access to outside influencers to come in and poke the pot because they know. And once again, you're looking at Russia's psyops. He knows our buttons.
Oh yeah.
And he has found it, and he knows that these people that believe in these buttons are the ones that are very easy to push and very easy to get your fingers into the pie, and they act out and they squeal and they have no idea what they're talking about. But you've got conspiracy theories. I mean, I don't know if you saw the JFK thing that went on in Dallas, Texas. So you're gonna get a kick out of this. The QAnon crowd, and we're talking the Marjorie Taylor.
This will be a good one. QAnon's always good.
So they congregated where John F. Kennedy was shot, because they believed that John F. Kennedy Jr., who is also dead, was going to come back in a limousine, step out and announce his running as Trump's VP in the next presidential election. So they gathered in the thousands in Dallas, to see this guy who was dead. This is like the Hellbop comet shit, was going to magically reappear because he's not really dead. All right, once again, QAnon conspiracy. And then because this is a fervent Democrat who is JFK Jr., he was going to announce that he was going to run with Donald Trump to be the next be president again in 2024. To give credence to it. And when he didn't show up, they were all disappointed.
Who believes this shit? If
people,
who the fuck does?
The same people who believe the world is
makes
flat.
my head hurt. It literally makes my head hurt.
The same people that believe that Australia is a conspiracy perpetrated by NASA to give credence to the world is round there. Kyle Irvine, whatever his name is, for the Celtics for a while. That wasn't something he said. He believes the world is flat. A motherfucker who flies in a plane and can literally look out. And by the way, people, if you're listening to this and you're trying to figure out the curve, you don't see the curve of the Earth this way. When you look at a plane, you look at it this way, and you can literally see it bending on the horizon like this. It literally starts to bend down. When you're flying, like, just take a flight from San Francisco to London, you go up by Greenland, stand up, look out the plane, and you will literally see it come out this way. You can see it when the sun's up, and then you can see it with the stars. It literally does like a very slight parabola you down. All right, that's exactly what it does. It's ridiculous. Like these people are ludicrous, but they're everywhere. And you know what the problem is? Is that we let
people have an opinion who shouldn't have an opinion.
Like, we didn't shut that down. We entertained it. We spent 1993 to 2010 like telling people that everybody's opinion's valid, and we need to listen to it instead of being like.
I don't know if it was that long ago. I think it was more like 2003 to 2019.
Well,
Telling everybody
it definitely hit its swing in the early 2000s when skinny jeans and shit came around. Instead of telling people they were like, you know,
dude, that was hilarious.
You know when it was. You know what it was. What honestly was when they came out and they were saying like, don't yell at a child because it's demeaning, and don't, you know, everybody goes to timeout. And you can't swat them on the butt because that's abuse.
Yep.
Like that kind of stuff. Like abuse.
Participation trophy era kids. That was the one.
Everybody gets a participation, and so everybody's points are now valid. And so you can't look at someone and be like, "This person's a fucking moron." Like shun him. Like this is detriment to society. So,
like the guy who used to be the guy who sat there and went, "The world is ending," with a sign, and you're like, give him $1. He's gonna die when he's young. He'll starve to death. And like now they're like, you know what? He's right. The world is ending, and it's just no. Yeah.
Idiocracy in full swing. But our problems here. Like I said, we are gripped in Rittenhouse fever in the U.S. right now. It is like
I saw it. There's things here that there's periodic articles. Like I think he cried on the stand today. And I got to say this about the Rittenhouse fiasco.
Yeah.
I have to say this about the Rittenhouse fiasco. I don't give a fuck. Like one way or the other, I don't give a fuck. Like listen, okay? Yeah,
everybody had guns.
The people who charged the guy with the gun, you deserve to be shot instead of having a gun and shooting back. Don't be there. Two, the kid with the gun who shot him, you weren't authorized to have that weapon. So you should be punished. So honestly, everybody's getting what they deserve. If you punish Rittenhouse and those guys got killed and injured, y'all got what you deserve.
So,
moving on.
So here's what's funny is that I want to briefly touch on this because people. But here's the funny thing, is that a 17-year-old kid goes and borrows a gun from somebody else. It's not his gun. He then crosses state lines. I mean, if this was me, if I had just borrowed somebody else's gun and crossed the state lines, I'm getting fucked in the ass for at least 3 weeks by Bubba anywhere else, right? He goes there under the guise of being a medic out past curfew in an area that is in martial law, pretty much, all right? Because of riots. But it make no sense. The people that he shot are both victims and rioters and looters, all right? They are victims.
They're not. They weren't. It wasn't like they were strolling down the street and then they were stopping Rittenhouse from being a psychopath during a public shooting. Like they rushed him with a freaking AR-15.
And they had one of them had a pistol in his hand. The other one had a skateboard as a weapon.
Exactly. I mean, so like it's not like these things. Like when I hear Rittenhouse talk and when I hear when I read exactly what happened, you know, I'm like, okay, you know what? Honestly, if I had my authorized weapons, I would have shot him. But he shouldn't have been there with the AR-15 to begin with. So what do you
think? Was it an AR-15? I thought it was an AR-7. But I mean,
no, it's an AR-15. It was an AR-15.
So I had to go check the
transcript. It always is an AR-15. Always.
No. So this is the one time I think it was actually a 7, which is why.
I was watching the courtroom. and the prosecution asked him. They said, "So you had your AR-15 like 100 times?" He's like, "Yes." And they're like, "You passed it off to your friend in that alleyway or whatever." And he said, "Yes, I did."
All right.
And they said, "Then why didn't you give it to your friend later?" And he said, "I didn't feel comfortable."
All right. So the best part about this situation is the guys that rushed him on the street. So he gets engaged. So first off, the Castle Act doctrine, which he is potentially in violation of, because we're going to find out in this shit show of a trial we got going on. He goes to a Castle Act, just like in most states that have it. Even California has something like this. Mm-hmm. You can defend your property and a direct family member's property, or property of someone when the owner is on the property and being harassed. None of that is Kyle Rittenhouse. The owner wasn't there. He's not related to the person, and it's not his property. Yep. He is a minor out past curfew in an area that's under martial law, basically martial law, and he
with a weapon that's not registered him
across state lines. Exactly. He then shows up and says he's doing medical aid. Cool, he may have been. That's fine. He gets chased through the parking lot in a situation that he has basically created. He went there pretending to be a toy soldier, being a man, and then got himself isolated away from his unit. and he got chased out. This is what happens when you're in a combative situation and you don't know what the fuck's going on. He then gets chased. And people have asked me, because they're like, they know I'm center left. And they're like, what would you have done? And I've been like, I'd have shot the fuck out of those guys. And I'm like, why? I'm like, 'cause I'm not going to die. I mean, what am I going to do? Yeah. So the guy with the pistol pointed it at him. I'd have shot that guy immediately. I would have shot him when he turned his back to run, the shot that killed him, I'd have shot him in the back too. All right? Because I'm not giving him a chance to turn back around.
Well, anybody who's ever had proper firearms training or military training or police training, despite what all the leftist woke people want to say about it, because they have absolutely no idea what they're talking about in this area. They don't have experience with it most of the time. You don't ever pull the trigger with the intent to wound. And you do not engage with your weapon unless you intend to pull the trigger. So if you're in a situation where your opponent has a means to kill you, and this can be a skateboard, a baseball bat, a knife, or a firearm, take the target out. This is where I get most frustrated with these type of trials. It's not what Rittenhouse did, and it's not who died. It's the fact that the discussion deteriorates into would you have? And the problem here is that they need to look at it as this, which is, if I came at you to kill you or cause grievous harm, you're just going to let it happen and let it sort itself out, or you can do something.
The question is, did you believe? And the answer is yes. And so once the situation has escalated to that, I think he's full rights to defend himself in that situation. Now, here is the problem. One, you have a minor who, I believe, and I had to go look it up, is under, he's on a juvenile offense for being in an altercation with a female a month or two back, where he had to do community service because he basically was rejected by a girl and got in a confrontation with a girl, and then got his ass kicked by two black dudes when he started hitting on the girl, like physically hitting the girl. It got him community service. But two, you've got to look at this situation where so here's the problem. Murder one is on the table. I don't think he went there with the intent to actually kill a specific person. I don't think you can prove murder one. Now,
you're not
maybe they have all of them on the table, but you're not going
to. He could get a manslaughter charge out of it. It's not murder one.
A manslaughter, maybe murder two. Murder two is hard to prove, but he borrowed a gun to go into a combative area, so he went seeking violence. That should be relatively easy to prove, but the prosecution's worth its salt.
See, this is where you and I are gonna. This is where you and I will differentiate on this one, and it's only because I've been in these situations before, legally carrying, and I do not get the impression. I do think he was playing toy soldier, but I don't think he was playing toy warrior. I think he brought the weapon because he's scared to death of getting fucked up and getting killed or shot at without a weapon there.
No,
I believe
militia group.
I know he did, but the power of the group of numbers does not mean that you intend to kill. It means you're that's like gang member. It's like some gang members join the gang for safety. It's the same thing. Now, do I think it's right? No, but I don't think that he went there with any means. His eyes. I know killers. And I don't see in his eyes anything that denotes somebody with the intent to kill.
I don't think he went there. I don't think he went there with the intent to murder somebody. I definitely think he went there with the intent to agitate potentially hostile individuals and create a scene. And I think
agitation, yes, but with the group, he doesn't have the balls to do it alone, which is why I don't think he would have been able to do it, without the group.
So what happens is you have a person who has broken 3 laws to get there, which puts him on the same scale of criminal with the criminals that are trespassing and vandalizing. They're both Rittenhouse is a criminal, and so are these guys. They're both criminals. They're both breaking the law and being here in areas that aren't even in their state, for fuck's sake. All right, that would be like me going to Nevada to fucking deal with some Nevada issues.
Yeah, no, we're agreed on this part. We're in the same. We're definitely on the same point for that.
So he's gone there to provoke. Literally, he's got there's literally no dog in this fight for him. It's not bleeding over into his state. He doesn't stop at the state lines and post up like they did with the murders in Summer of Sam type situation, where the New Yorkers got their guns and posted up in their areas and were like, anybody comes in you don't know, turn them around with your gun and say, get the fuck out of here. We're not having, there's murder on the loose. And or the riots in LA when people armed up. You had the roof Koreans up on the roof and
sniping.
And so there's a different story. That's their business, is their home. This is someone who went there literally looking for a fight. Now, I don't think he went there to kill somebody, but he definitely went there to be on Reddit looking like a badass. Because he's
Yeah,
17.
no. Like I said, he wasn't playing toy warrior. He was playing toy soldier. Like,
So
this
he
is
did
different.
manslaughter. His potential murder to unintentional murder. He went there looking for a fight, and it escalated into something else. So I think he's got a voluntary manslaughter or murder to on his hands that he's going to be in trouble with. Now the trial's been a shit show. The judge has a Trump ringtone on his ringtone and yelled at the defense attorney once already. It's an
Well, the yelling at the attorney, the attorney kind of deserved it. I was watching what was going on there, but you can tell that the judge is also like conservative. It's just a conservative judge, is what it is, and it's to be expected in that area of the United States.
He won the election. I mean, that's it. He ran uncontested and won. You didn't want to have a judge like that on your ticket, then you should have elected somebody else. I mean, that's the nature of the beast. But that's the Rittenhouse case. But like I said, we don't know anything about Poland or Ukraine or Germany or gas problems, because what's important is this 17-year-old killed. These two criminals that killed each other are taking the news up. It's ridiculous because people want to create a situation. I mean, that's just the way it is. So
anyway, that's a good hour and like an hour and a half or 2 hours of conversation right now.
It's 1 hour. We've been going for about an hour and 5 minutes.
All right, I think we're good for now, man. I need to get going because I've got some stuff I got to do today here before.
You've got that important thing to take care of. I'm gonna go to bed because it's fucking 3:30 in the morning. So in case you didn't know, our European friends over here, we say 3:30 in the morning because we don't use proper time. Fuck a 24-hour clock. It's 12 and 12. All right, I don't want to confuse you properly. All right. Well, anyways, look forward to next time. Next time I'll have some beers. I've got some Icelandic beers in mind that I want to get to try out. I think that'll be good to review. Other than that, next time I do want to talk about cryptocurrencies.
Okay.
Anything else?
No, that's it. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed this conversation, and I hope you had a few beers while you were listening to us. We will see you next time. Have a good weekend.